Everything bros, talking everything bros. You already know that anything goes with the Everything Bros podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Everything Bros podcast. My name is Tony, the smartest middle brother.
And I'm Will. I am the most handsome oldest brother.
And I'm Matt, the coolest younger brother.
Today's topic is college. College prep seems to start earlier and earlier in elementary school. I remember taking standardized tests in 6th grade to get admissions to competitive colleges. But how much does high school really prepare you for college? Do you even need college to get your dream job? Is trade school better? As always, we're going to have the oldest brother kick us off.
So you know what's so interesting about this is that we did, with some of my students, they have these EDPs, which is all their college prep stuff that they have to fill out, and they have to talk about career days and all this. And it just seems so insane to me that for a 13-year-old, they have to start figuring out all this college stuff. I mean, for crying out loud, when I was in 8th grade, I barely knew my left from my right, let alone having to make a multi-$1,000 choice on what college to go to or whether college was even right for me. I don't know. What do you guys think about this whole thing?
It's a lot of pressure because you kind of have to decide, not only where if you're going to go to college and where you're going to go to college, but what you're going to do. And you have to make that decision 17 years old, 16 years old. And with prep
14,
starting earlier.
13.
Yeah, 14, in some of your cases. It's just crazy ridiculous. How old are you in 6th grade? 12?
Literally 11.
As far as I know.
11 or 12. It's just crazy to me. And these kids, man, I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, they're going to be fine. They're going to be great in life. But I can see in their eyes, they're just so stressed. They're just so worried about making the wrong decision. Kids have so much anxiety now. There's so much pressure to be right. Then you have to worry about not, dressing weird so that, nobody judges you on that. And you're in this age where everything is so sensitive and everything matters to you so much. And then all of a sudden, all these adults are like, hey, child, what? Yeah, you're thinking about college? It's just so crazy. I don't understand.
It really feels like hey, congrats, you're an adult now. Good luck.
Yeah.
And it's just oh, okay.
Being an actual adult feels like that too, just full stop. I mean, that's exactly what it feels like.
But being 17 and being all right, do you want to go into crippling debt or do you want to not make anything out of your life? That's what they tell you, because they say if you don't go to college, it's wrong. And so, yeah, it's either crippling debt or nothing,
The thing about the debt, though, is you don't, there, even amongst people who go to college, there's different ways to do it. Especially now when there's the routes of a 2-year university, a 4-year university, or just community college, and you can sort of pay your way through one versus another. But you kind of have to choose that sort of path, whether you're going to go into crippling debt like myself.
Yeah, it almost seems like the choice is that, do I want to get done in 4 years and have $100,000 of debt? Do I want to do it in 8 years and work part-time and be really busy and walk away with no debt? Or do I want to maybe go into the military and GI Bill that whole thing and then have the government pay for it? It just seems there are no good options. They say that, oh, you'll have scholarships and everything, and then you apply for the financial aid and it doesn't work out. It's just a lot of pressure. It's so much to think about when you're that young.
One of the biggest slaps in the face I think I've ever felt is being worried about debt. And they're like, oh, yeah, just look in your program. There's tons of scholarships I'm in the College of Engineering and Technology, right? And I'm like, okay, yeah.
Which you think it would have a lot of money, right?
Yeah, and it does. But the program I'm in of Visual and Built Environments literally has one scholarship out of 80 total for the College of Engineering and Technology. It has one, and it's only for seniors. And
did you guys worry about, because I always felt like I was told you need to get into a good school. You need to get in a good school. If you get into a good school, they're going to have lots of money. Good school, good school. And Matt and I, Matt's still going, but we went to the same university, and Tony went to a quote unquote good school, by modern standards. But
Went
I
to a
don't
Big
think I
Ten.
got a Big Ten, a Big Ten school, I guess for comparison's sake, and not just a semi-large public university. But I feel like it almost doesn't matter in some ways that where you go in terms of the quality of education that you get, what you get out of the school. And I know, Tony, you have some opinions on this, having gone to multiple colleges, which is something different from what Matt and I have experienced. And full stop, we understand, for anybody listening, that's like, well, clearly college is not the only option post high school, post graduating. We get that.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that. We're going to address that because clearly we're biased, having been 3 college students. But that's the good college thing is just, I hear it all the time from kids. And Tony, does it matter?
So the short answer to that is no, but it matters. But there's a continuum. Like, it matters less the higher you get in education. Like, applying to an undergrad, like, it's kind of like if you kind of think high schools are almost at the same playing field, which is not per se, because there's really competitive high schools.
Oh yeah.
You go to an undergrad, it's like a different level. But when you get into grad school, it's like most people in any grad school, at least the ones I've interacted with, they're all like in the same boat. And it gets less and less competitive. And especially now going to med school in the fall, like, the best quote I've ever heard was, what do they call what do they call the person who's at the bottom of the med school class at the lowest university? Doctor. So, like, does it really matter?
Ever.
It's like you kind of get that. Now, I will say, for money wise, as it was brought up,
the next time I go to a doctor's office, I'm just going to say, can I see your transcript, sir?
Yeah.
Did you graduate? Did you
They don't even
bottom of your class?
What was your high school GPA?
Right.
They don't even, most med schools now do pass fail. They don't even get like a letter grade. So it doesn't even matter when you're there. But
I guess
what
it
I
would
would say about the money,
I guess it would make sense to say, oh yeah, you're right. There's not like being partway a doctor. Like,
Yeah,
C's don't get degrees.
I
don't
want
seem to
that D
apply.
plus doctor.
Yeah. So sorry. Talk about the money thing you were saying.
the budget doctor.
Is it cheaper considering the American healthcare system is very expensive? Like, can I just get the cheaper doctor?
Where's the clearance section?
The great
section in the
value brand
hospital.
doctor.
I didn't know about, at least for paying for university, is that I think the idea, especially in high school, is you go to a cheaper university or maybe a lower tier university. Sometimes they're correlated, sometimes they're not. That it'll be cheaper for you if you go to a cheaper school. Sure, the tuition will be lower. What I learned was that by the time I was done with my undergrad, I had much fewer loans than some people I know went to quote unquote lower universities, because my undergrad had more money to give.
Yeah.
Because they were a bigger school and because they got like all these crazy donors, they had more money to give to students. So I actually had less loans, which I guess the solution isn't go to a better school so you get less loans, but it's just something I didn't know until I got there. But
that's considering your program. That's considering the program you went to. I mean, your undergrad degree was in
biochemistry.
Yeah,
So
it was
chemistry
biochemistry.
department. Yeah.
And you have to think, I mean, those departments, like the STEM departments, I mean, I majored in creative arts in music and music
That's
education.
really your degree? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's my degree. Yeah. we both have the piece of paper, Tony, don't worry. And Matthew, for all intents and purposes, I mean, essentially has a creative arts degree, although you're doing computer science.
Although I'm STEM, though.
Also STEM. So, when you're doing creative arts, I mean, there's no money. I mean, there's barely enough money to hire the professors. Like an adjunct professor in the creative arts who's teaching and working, who maybe has a master's or a doctorate, might get paid $20,000 a year without benefits. It's just insane. It's just insane that we expect all these students to go to college and then we say, oh, but do what you love. Follow your passion, which is also just a load of bull, in my opinion. And we're paying these people so little to teach these students going to college and it's just it just seems like it's a obviously there's a lot of systematic issues within that.
Matthew might have a better idea about this, because especially with the going to school for your passion sort of thing, you don't really. There are a bunch of people in your field that don't get degrees, isn't that right?
Yeah. So, for context, I'm going to school for video games, for video game development. For me specifically, I'm doing programming and also animation and 3D specifically. So I do the stuff pre-animation. And yeah, like a common thing in the video games industry, at least, is just having those connections and have like if you know someone in a studio, chances are they can just give you a good word and you'll get something, which is almost the point of going to school for it at this point, is to try and get a connection like that. I mean, a couple of my professors have gotten me like opportunities at different places, or like offered like, I mean, one of my professors has his own studio and he runs it locally, so there's stuff like that. But yeah, it's common, I think, to not go to school for it, but I think if you don't, you're limiting yourself. I truly believe that if you don't have like a degree in, like, say you're trying to be a programmer, if you don't have a degree in computer science, you're never gonna work at a AAA studio, not one day in your life.
Yeah, because that degree shows that you've spent some time developing some expertise in that area. One thing though I want to pick out of what you said, Matt, is the people you meet, and I didn't know if you were going to say the buzzword, but the buzzword that everybody throws around, which is networking and how all that works. Which
I hate networking so much. I hate it so much.
Is it just the prospect of talking to people, or
it's the prospect of this makes or breaks my career. It's ridiculous to me that, if you don't talk to this dude, you're never going to get a job. And it's like, what? I'm good at what I do. Is that not enough?
That is,
and it's not.
That is so true.
And
it really is a dog eat dog world where it always comes back to, it's not what you know, but who you know. And in some cases, it's both. And now we're gonna talk a lot about problems with college, and I think we've already sort of brought up some systemic issues. Here's one thing I will say. In the music education world, and especially the music performance world, it's all about who you know. I mean, think about this.
Really?
You're let's say you play like electric bass guitar, and you can't be at a gig, so you find your friend who also plays electric bass guitar that you can vouch for that gig. If you didn't have that network there, they're not just going to put an ad out and say, hey, we need some random bass guitar player to cover this gig. I mean, it really is about who you know, and especially in different scenes. The fact that I know other music educators outside of the state of Michigan gives me a leg up if I ever wanted to try and find a different job in a different state. Or if you're a music performer, you want to know, like if you're a clarinet player, like I'm a clarinet player, if you want to know what's happening in the scenes around other clarinet player circles, you need to know those people. So it is a huge pain in the butt, but I think that is one of the benefits of college, especially a 4-year university, because I don't think you make those same connections going to a community college, because we always hear all the time, go to a community college, get some credits and do that. But before we jump into that part of it, let's talk about the networking thing specifically.
In medicine, it goes back and forth. So like it's odd, but not only do you have to network, but a really common thing in especially like research, if you want to like do research in someone's lab or something, you have to either have taken that like professor's class, or you just cold email them. Like cold calling and cold emailing is still super, super common. Like emailing someone out of the blue and asking for like an informational interview and like chatting with them
to pick their brain. that
Pick the
that
exactly.
cliche.
Yeah, you get really good at writing these emails. So like, there's
Some
that
people
aspect.
I know, I've heard they even put a filter to that phrase in their email to automatically put into spam because they get so many of them.
That's rough. But in medicine, it's very true that you do have to network, and getting like a letter of recommendation for an application for a job is, I swear, it's almost just as important as getting that piece of paper after 4 years. And so it's sort of both, because especially when you start off in medicine, you don't know anybody. You kind of have to get in that scene, which is why people who have like family members who are in the medical community or do research, they kind of have a leg up, but that leg up goes away after a few years in college. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it sort of levels out a little bit. But the thing I want to talk about that I sort of brought up earlier was this whole community college thing and then transferring credits. And again, none of us did this. I know friends that did. It always seems like every major university has a community college that's nearby that sort of people sort of filter through. Like, at least that was true for where I went to school. But I hear so many students, and here's the thing. I always say to kids, and my thought is, if you're gonna go, if you know you're college bound, go to the 4-year university. And by the way, we're not implying by saying 4-year university that you go to that university for 4 years. But if that's your goal, to go to college, go there. Because it's so much less in some ways about the schooling, especially if you don't know what you want to do, than it is about meeting people, experiencing different things, trying different things. You know, I mentioned earlier about the follow your passion thing, but none of us are born with an innate passion. We don't just pop into this world and be like, I'm going to be destined for this. Like, that's not how it works. That's not how it works at all. We only settled onto the things that we did because we just thought we were good at it. I one day in high school realized, I'm like not a terrible clarinet player. I guess I could do this. I know Tony is like, hey, science is pretty neat. Like Bill Nye the Science Guy, like science rules. And I know Matt's like, hey, video games are pretty dope. I guess I can continue doing this. It's just, we're not born with that though. So if you still don't know what that thing is that you might want to stick to, go experience some stuff. I mean, colleges have the craziest classes nowadays. I remember I literally needed an extra credit for a college and I took a kayaking class. Like, you can find the most outlandish things to do just to try stuff. And once you find something, stick with that. See if that's something you can be good at and make some money on it. So I don't know. It just,
I think that's funny too, because literally the reason why I do what I do now is it was an accident. Like, it was in high school for me, but it was my sophomore year. It was just before my sophomore year, like a few weeks before it started, and I was picking classes. And I'm not a good history student, but I didn't want to be behind with my friends, so I wanted to take AP World History. And my counselor and our mother said no. And they suggested, hey, we have this new class, AP Computer Science. You should try it. And I was like, that's not something I would have thought of before, but I guess, sure, I'll do it. And I absolutely fell in love with that class. The teacher was the best teacher I've ever had in my life to date. He was my favorite I've ever had, and it's what got me into programming. I mean, that class, that was the best AP test I've ever taken. I'm always going to flex this. I got a 4 on that test, and I didn't even finish it. So I'm just saying, I'm kind of a big deal.
You would have got that 5.
Happened if
if I finished, I would have got that 5. But honestly, I think getting a 4 without finishing is cooler, so I'm going to take it. And yeah, it was completely accidental, and it just kind of was what it was, and now I'm here. I feel like if you didn't have that experience before, going to a 4-year might help you with that.
Do you think, Matt, you would have been equally into that subject? Because one of the things you said very specifically that I want to pick apart is you said because you had a great teacher. Do you think you still would have been as into computer science as a subject just because of your innate interest, or did the teacher have something to do with that?
Teacher, 100%.
Really?
Like now I'm just interested because I know what it can do, but like
right.
Then when I was like 14, 15, I was like, okay, I guess this is kind of neat. Like, yeah, programming, I've heard of this before or whatever. But the professor was just well, he was fun, and he knew, or a teacher, I guess, because it was high school, but he knew what he was talking about, and it was, he put it all into perspective. And I mean, my final project in that class was making like a user interface and making like a almost like an app. Like I made like an app for Dungeons and Dragons. I made like a little thing for it. And it's just with code, and I was like, this is awesome. I actually made something with this, and like I could totally do this. And if I hadn't had that guidance from the teacher and I hadn't had him, there's no way I would have been as interested in it as I am now.
Tony, did you have a similar experience when it came to knowing you wanted to go into medicine? Because I think obviously when we are dancing around the topic is when you, even if you go to college, like what do you do? How did you get to that point? So did you have a similar experience, Tony?
I would actually say yes, actually, because I didn't land on like medicine until I want to say like sophomore year of college. 2-3 years into college, I was like, all right, we're gonna apply and go the doctor route, and we're gonna go be a practicing physician. But prior to that, one of my early experiences with science was high school
Bill Nye.
chemistry. No, not Bill Nye. Well, yes, Bill Nye, but was chemistry in high school. And
Right.
it was that same thing where it was like a teacher was just like made it so much more interesting than I would have otherwise. And I was like, well, this is kind of cool. And then through that, kind of follow the subject. But when I started college, I was like, I know I was going to do like chemistry, biology, something. Like, I think when I chat with like, when I would chat with like freshmen in college, or even like before when I used to like try to advise high school students, I haven't talked with a high school student in a minute now. I would tell them of like,
They're not that interesting, just so you know.
I would tell them like, you don't have to pick a major because there's a bazillion majors at bazillion
Right.
schools, but you need, in my mind, you kind of have to have a field at least when you're going into college. Like if you want to do science or if you want to do chemistry, that's a field. If you want to do engineering, that's also enough of a field. And then you can sub-specialize from there. But if you're go and you change your major like 3, 4, 5 times, at that point, I just don't know if it's worth it to keep going and paying much, like thousands and thousands of dollars each year just to test. I mean, if you have disposable income, I suppose, but in general, I don't think that's the way to go.
Yeah, the income part of things makes things really challenging. Well, and obviously, I mean, you said you didn't know until your sophomore year. So there is some sense of through gen eds or whatever you do within that university, there is some wiggle room. But yeah, if you're like, I'm on my 6th different major change at this point,
Mhm.
but I don't know. No, I didn't change my major in college. Tony, you didn't. Matthew, I don't know if you did or did not.
No, I only added a minor. That was it.
Yeah, so I guess none of us can really speak to the changing major part of it, but I think that's a good point, Tony. If you're within a field, at least there's some overlap in classes and in
Mhm.
courses you take. You know, if you're going into chemistry, like everybody's got to take Chem 1, everybody's got to take Chem 2. There's those equalizing classes. But man, teachers are such an important role in this whole thing. I think we cannot deny that. Speaking from experience.
Yeah, as a teacher now, like, do you feel like, do you ever get worried that you're not making that impression on students, or do you feel like you are?
I
Ooh.
feel so much anxiety about this all the time.
Mm.
I do, especially as a creative arts subject. I'm not going to use the E word, electives. I hate that word. I hate that it even exists. But that aside, no, as a creative arts subject, I feel an obligation not to. I don't teach my class like I'm trying to make every single student in there want to be a music educator. You know, that's not the goal. I value music. I value the arts. That's why it's my career. And all I want to do at the end of the day is allow students to feel more connected, feel more creative through music, enjoy the process of preparing, performing music, become lifelong appreciators of music, because that helps sustain this art form and sustain that. And it just keeps your life more enriched. It allows you to be a little bit more humanitarian and be more connected in that way, and feel a little bit more like a whole person in that. Because I think without those things, if every single student was a scientist, I mean, think about the pandemic. What was the first thing that everybody turned to when the whole pandemic stuff hit? Was music and arts. It wasn't, man, I really, really need to work out molar mass and all and big K. These are things that I'm trying to remember from high school chemistry, so forgive me,
Old
Tony.
stuff.
But just a whole bunch of buzzwords and jargon. So I feel a great responsibility in trying to allow my students to enjoy it that way. I will say, pandemic teaching, really hard to do that. And this is not the year for teachers to be so concerned about, am I being a good teacher right now? Am I doing the best job I can? Because let me tell you, it's really challenging. And the biggest thing that I'm just infuriated at is this whole, we need to extend the school year, or we still need a standardized test to see what students are missing. It's like, you know what students are missing? They're missing the empathy from all these people who are trying to impose. I mean, who's saying that students have lost learning? Who's setting those standards? Students? Or is it the adults in charge of what they're trying to learn? It's all imposed by people other than the students. And go, Tony, go.
It's you bring up a good point too, of like, it's not just one thing that you sort of study per se. Like in undergrad, I studied biochem. I also picked up a major in Middle Eastern studies, but it's basically an Arabic language course. And now I get like a breadth of skills. And in grad school, the same sort of thing, doing epidemiology, but doing like other subset of stuff. And like you start to collect skills. So you really shouldn't think of schooling as much as I'm getting from point A to point B. It's all those like sort of twists and turns and those other classes you take. I mean, I know I'm a big proponent of music, taking marching band and band for years and years and years. All those other things help. And like maybe you take up like student council or band council, or you join a club, science Olympiad, and like you do something and you gain that sort of skill. When I think of like interviews I've had, they talk about like, oh, you did this academic thing, sure. But the main stuff is like, oh, how did you work in a team? Or what's something you're really proud of? And if you say, I'm really proud of this A+ I got in OChem, like if it has a story behind it, sure. But
it's also weird flex, but okay.
If you if you don't say that, you got to have other stuff. Is what I'm saying. That's what kind of makes you that like well-rounded, I guess is what we would call that person.
Now, here's to shift topics a little bit, because we have beaten the whole college thing to no end. And again, we all went and or are going or are still in college. We very much see the value in that. But what about not going to college? How do you guys feel about that option? Or do you know anybody that's pursued that?
I think right now it is legitimately the smartest thing you can do. In current pandemic remote learning, it's not worth it to go to college. It's not worth it to start college, and I will stand by that. It's not worth it. Because it's the same price. I don't even think community college. It's the same price, but worse quality of education in every single way.
You know what's interesting too?
There's
is that
like
some
other than
colleges have still increased the online like lab fees and everything, so it's actually technically more expensive depending on the course, which is the most ridiculous thing.
Like I truly, and I mean I'm just a guy on the internet right now, but like I really don't think it's worth it. Like, if you're maybe about to finish your senior year, I mean, you've lived through this pandemic, you've lived through remote learning, you see how awful it is. I genuinely think you shouldn't go. I think you should work. I think you should, because I mean, like, if you wait, I mean, yeah, you won't go with your peers, whatever, but you're gonna meet new people in college no matter what. I mean, I have moms in my classes. They're 40, 50 plus, getting their education, and they're great people, and no one thinks less of them because they got their education at the time they needed to, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think, again, if you're gonna do it, I really think you should wait. I really don't think you should go now with
I've had
remote learning.
It's interesting you say that because I know a lot of people, especially when you get to like post undergrad sort of thing, like the prospect of going to grad school, getting a master's, even getting a PhD. It's like, I think of it almost like, I don't think it's this way, but it's like sunk costs. Like, okay, you got the master's, let's go off and get the PhD. And that's not saying that your master's is wasted, but I know people who get comfortable in the way education works, the like academia. So it's more scary to go get a job than to just go get a master's and then get a higher paying job later on. This isn't everybody, but in terms of like going to college and going not to, I do know some people who are going to grad school just because it's the more comfortable option, which is very different than what you're saying.
But
No,
at the same time,
I totally get that.
but at the same time, I think kids are not conditioned to take risks. Again, this goes back to the whole everything that they've been taught since they were young is you have to have a plan, you have to do this, you have to do that. All they know is school, right?
Mm-hmm.
All they know is school. All they know is the four walls of the classroom that they've been around. So I think it's a product of that, to be completely honest, that they would much rather choose school than the scarier option of going out into the real world.
Yeah, I think it's also not even just like school, but it's a product of routine. This is what they've done since they were literally 4 years old. You every day from September to June or something. You get up at 8 a.m. You go to school and you come home at 2:30 or 3, whatever. It's the same thing for 12 years, 13 years or whatever. And so, of course, you want to just follow the routine of, all right, now I'm on to the next school, and you want to follow the pattern. So I think it's that too. I think it's like you want to just keep going with what you know, and you're right. It makes them not want to take risks, and taking a job is scary. Your boss is scary. So yeah, I definitely think that's part of it too.
Bosses are scary.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that too, like employers don't make it that easy to not go to college.
Or we need a master's degree, 5 years of experience for an entry level job.
So like even the ones that you want, even the positions that you're trying to get, you have to get more school. So it's like
that sigh.
It's rewarding going to more school. So it might not be necessarily that people believe that, it could be part that people believe that it's more comfortable. And I definitely see that. And honestly, it makes it easy for me to just keep going to school. But
even what's also
they don't
crazy
need
is all the, I know Matthew, you've applied for like a bunch of internships and there's just all these intensive applications and you haven't gotten a single acceptance to 6 or 7 applications. I mean, it's even impossible just to get those. And are those paid? Are they unpaid? I mean,
they're the ones I apply to, they're paid. Yeah.
Okay. So at least get something.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I think the best analogy I can come up with this is that like education's like a cross country bus, right? Like you get on the bus at a certain time. You don't really know when the best time to get on the bus is, but most people get on the bus about the same time. And it's a gamble that you ride it out to a stop later on. And the point is that the stop farther down the road is better than your current stop. Now, some people never get on the bus. Maybe they walk, ride a bike, or like figure out how to fly a plane. And then those are those people who go off and right out of high school and do well. But there are other people who stay on the bus for that promise of like something later, and you get comfortable in your seat on the bus, and eventually you get off. And the scary thing about buses is that most of them run in loops, and you could end up at the same spot that you were when you first got on the bus, or maybe only a little bit down the road. So there's all these other factors that kind of go into it.
That analogy hit me a little bit hard where you said when you said loop back, I just kind of got this like pit of fear, like, oh no, have I overstayed my welcome? And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm not in college anymore. I have not.
And
Would
there are
you
some
say it hit you like a bus?
Oh, bad joke time. Thank you.
Yes.
But it's so interesting because, and the bus is so appealing. And the kids from elementary, middle school are like, hey, everybody, this bus, pretty awesome. Why don't we all just get on the bus? And why don't we just ride this thing out for 4 or 5, 6 years? And hey, and then you just get dropped in the middle of the desert, with just nothing. Mm-hmm. And obviously, the important thing to note is that not all buses are created equal. Not all colleges are created equal. Your circumstance, I'm going to keep riding this analogy into the ground. The circumstance of what you need to get on the bus. Some people have to pay a different amount to get on the bus.
Some buses don't have stops in your area.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I'm telling you. I think that's the scariest part, is that it's disproportionate in that way. And I guess my final word on this is that the bus exists and you can get on whenever you want, and you make that choice. So get on when you feel like it's right for you.
And at the end of the day, we're talking about the goal of college and what we're doing, but you need to decide that goal for yourself. At the end of the day, you need to find what is going to make you feel fulfilled, what's going to help you put food on the table, because at the end of the day, it costs money to be a human being. Unless you're going to go #van life, just like live out of your car and just go travel. And if that's the case, that life looks so appealing, by the way, on a completely different note. You know how many times I'm like, I could go to college, or I could just buy a van and live out of it. But it's just, at the end of the day, find something that's going to make you happy, find something that's going to help pay the bills. And whether or not the goal is college or not, then you just have to ride that bus to wherever it might take you. And with that, everybody, that is the second episode of the Everything Bros podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We're always looking for other topics to cover. So if you have any suggestions, whether you're listening to this on YouTube or Spotify, if you're listening to it on YouTube, feel free to drop something in the comments. Or if you'd like, we do have an email. You can email us at everythingbrospodcast@gmail.com. And we would love to hear any and all podcast topics that you might have, because on Everything Bros, anything goes. Thanks so much for listening, everybody.